Welcome to the Think Yourself Healthy podcast, where you meet the intersection of mind, body, and soul. I'm your host, Heather Duranja, founder of Nutrition Vixen, registered dietitian, nutritionist, personal trainer, and cognitive behavioral specialist. I'm a mother, author, self-improvement junkie, and recovering perfectionist turned professional half-asser. Each week, I'll be bringing on a guest or a topic that will help you go from surviving to thriving. Are you with me? All right, here we go with today's episode. Hello, everybody. On today's show, I have a special guest with me. Her name is Marina Tarasova, and Marina is the co-founder and COO of Paloma Health, an online medical practice improving care for hypothyroidism. Marina studied business and technology and spent her career in healthcare, from working for Fortune 500 companies like Johnson & Johnson and launching life-saving and life-changing medications. She also consulted for healthcare clients at Boston Consulting Group. Marina decided to build a company after being a part of launching Capsule, a direct-to-consumer pharmacy in New York. She has been looking for ways to use technology to improve the way people receive their health care, and that led her to meet her co-founder, and together they started Paloma. Thank you so much, Marina, for being on today. I'm really excited to have a conversation with you around all things hypothyroidism and getting appropriate tests. So thank you for being with us.
Amazing. It's so good to be here with you, Heather, and can't believe I'm speaking to Nutrition Vixen. Really cool.
I am flattered to have you on. So let's see, how did we meet? Well, technically this is our first actual meeting, but
our first live meeting.
Yes.
Through our community teams. My gosh, I know we followed sort of like your work. Obviously, you talk a lot about the importance of thyroid health and appropriate testing. So we probably connected on social.
Yeah, I think Instagram is amazing. The opportunity to connect with awesome people who are like-minded and out there sharing the same kind of vision and mission allows us to collaborate, work together so that we can get the message out there to the audiences that are in desperate need. So today I'm hoping that we're going to be able to deliver some really great information for all of those out there who are confused about thyroid function, thyroid testing, what their options are, why they're frustrated with what the doctor tells them when they go in and say, I don't feel good. So I'm super excited, and I appreciate everything that you guys are doing. For me personally, your test is vital because I didn't have health insurance for the longest time. And so by not having health insurance, it made it really challenging for me to be able to afford to stay on top of lab testing to get the appropriate markers measured so that I could present that information to a doctor and say, I need you to prescribe the appropriate medication in order to get me back into an optimal range with my thyroid function. Yeah. So I am extremely grateful for everything that you guys are doing, and it's groundbreaking. It's going to be a game changer moving forward for a lot of people, since insurance companies pretty much tie the hands of our medical practitioners when it comes to requesting appropriate thyroid markers. So with all that being said, I'd like to just kind of dive in and talk about why thyroid patients are caught without great options in our current healthcare system. So would you like to talk a little about that?
Yeah, for sure. Well, it's definitely multifactorial. But one of the main reasons is there's a shortage of thyroid care specialists. So there's only 5,000 practicing endocrinologists in the United States. They're there to treat the 30 million diabetics, 70 million pre-diabetics, 25 plus million hypothyroid patients, all the osteoporosis and other hormonal conditions that they practice. So largely the care for hypothyroidism has been farmed out to primary care, which can be super great. And a lot of times thyroid conditions, thankfully, can be relatively easily managed by primary care. And that's awesome. Primary care doctors get 1 day of medical school training on the thyroid. So when something is not super straightforward, like you're taking your medications, your labs appear to be in the quote unquote normal range of what your lab says, but you're still experiencing symptoms, your primary care doctor is not always, I mean, I shouldn't say there's some fantastic physicians, but a lot of times won't have the tools to go deeper. And endocrinologists, there's at least a 37-day wait on average to see an endocrinologist. In some parts of the country, I know I was in California earlier this week, it's a 3 to 6 month wait to see an endocrinologist. And that's felt as a problem for both patients. It's a problem for doctors who want to send their patients to a specialist. They can't get the referral. So there's a shortage of care. As you refer, next point is, as Heather mentioned, insurance companies standardize the care a lot of times. So there's over 6 different types of hypothyroidism. You could be autoimmune mediated. You could have hypothyroidism as a result of having radiation done and having your thyroid out. You can have hypothyroidism from birth. So there's different types of hypothyroidism, but really only one main treatment. There's the drug that treats hypothyroidism one of them happens to be the #1 prescribed drug in the United States. So it's being used for all sorts of types of hypothyroidism. And the blood test, sorry.
What is that drug? What is that #1 drug?
The #1 prescribed drug in the US is levothyroxine. So that's T4 hormone.
Okay.
And that's what a lot of doctors will give for hypothyroidism. And it works reasonably well for a lot of people. And it's wonderful because it helps to replenish your T4 hormone. That's what your thyroid mainly produces. And then your body will convert it to T3 down the road. We can dive into some of that a little bit later.
Absolutely.
No, it's a critical drug. And a lot of times it's the main one and it works well. And then other times people need other things.
Right.
Insurance companies also have standardized the blood test for the condition. So a lot of times insurance companies will only allow or reimburse the TSH test. I think you've talked a lot about the fact that TSH is a pituitary hormone, and it measures what your thyroid produces, and it does a reasonably good job of it, but it doesn't give the full picture of what's going on.
Right.
Thyroid hormones in your body. So there are other markers that are important to test. And so that's another problem out there in the world. And so patients, frequently we hear, women mostly calling us and saying, I want to know more. My doctor won't give me the tests. I have symptoms. I am begging my doctor to give me tests, and that's just
right.
an easy thing to have to do. But that happens.
I get pretty frustrated as a practitioner when majority of the clientele I work with are women who suffer from autoimmune type of issues.
Yep.
And typically when we suspect that something is going on with their thyroid, the doctor will only order a TSH. And then unfortunately, the ranges of TSH that they are measuring are so wide. It doesn't really allow for identification of how optimal that TH range should be. And so more often than less, I'll see women who are above that 2.0 TSH mark. And from the research that I've done, anything over 2 indicates that the thyroid is not functioning as optimally as it can. It can contribute to a lot of anxiety and depressive disorders. And so women become very frustrated when they're going to the doctor and they're saying, I don't understand. My TSH is within that normal range, which goes from like 1.0 to 5. Yeah. 5. I mean, that's outrageous. That's such a wide range. And we know that, from the research that I've done, it shows that 1.5 to 2.0 is more of that optimal area where we know that the thyroid is functioning effectively, which will allow the metabolism and all of the other factors that are impacted by thyroid hormone to function as well as they can. So when we're only looking at TSH levels that are so broad, there's so much left unturned, and it's really frightening. And I can understand why people are so frustrated. And really, by the time they get to me, they pretty much give it up. They feel like I've tried everything. My recommendations are always to do a full thyroid panel. So would you like to talk a little bit about the markers that you guys test for with your panel?
Absolutely. Yeah. So we have a standard panel right now. We're working on adding more and different panels. So we could talk about that. But the standard panel, which we think everyone should start with, is your TSH, your free T4. So T4 is the number one hormone that's produced by your thyroid. About 80% of the hormones that are produced by your thyroid is T4. We test how that is freely circulating in your body to see if that is appropriately there in the blood. And then we also test for free T3, and that is a little bit controversial for some doctors and some practitioners about testing free T3. So this tests the free T3 in your blood. Mm-hmm. It does not test free T3 in your organs, which is arguably more important, but there simply is no test to see how much free T3 gets into your cells and into your organs. The technology doesn't exist.
Right.
So T4, that's circulating. So it's really important to test TSH, free T4, and then free T4 is converted in your body, largely in the liver and other organs, to free T3. T4 isn't super active by itself in your body, but it does convert and transport T3 to the appropriate cells. And T3 is the metabolic and the powerhouse thyroid hormone that is really critical for your body to function. And then lastly, we test for TPO autoantibodies. So TPO is another, I'm going to say hormone, but it may be more specific than a hormone that's produced by your thyroid. And a lot of times in autoimmune conditions, your autoimmune system is overreacting, and it overreacts the TPO antibodies that are produced for your thyroid, and it starts a thyroid attack.
Right.
Attack on your thyroid.
So the immune system can't identify that the TPO is actually a protein that is recognized by the thyroid. Therefore, the antigens start breaking down the tissue in the thyroid, contributing to what we call Hashimoto's hypothyroidism.
Exactly. That's exactly right, Heather. And so with this test, we uncover Hashimoto's thyroiditis for many patients, and that we uncover that their hypothyroidism is actually caused by this autoimmune condition. Whereas before they've only been taking TSH, they didn't know that they had the autoimmune condition. And obviously for the work you do and just for getting your care in general moving forward, it's really important to know if you have the autoimmune version of hypothyroidism or.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. And unfortunately, so when we have one autoimmune disease, once one has been turned on, it's usually a trigger to turn others on. And it's going to be environmental factors that really cause those to go into full blown, whether it's rheumatoid arthritis, fibromyalgia, MS, celiac. And so if we have one, that's a good indication that we need to look a little bit deeper to see if there potentially is more going on that hasn't been identified and diagnosed.
Yep, absolutely.
So I'm a big believer in determining, is this hypothyroidism or is this Hashimoto's hypothyroidism? Because the two are very, very different.
Absolutely.
Very different. So what about reverse T3?
The reverse T3 dilemma. And so it's not part of our standard kit for a number of reasons. First of all, it would make the cost too prohibitive for everyone to do it.
Okay.
I think it's an important marker, but I don't think it's necessary for a majority of people to have. I think it's something that you do the initial test first. You understand what those markers tell you. If you do the treatment, that's recommended, you try it, you continue to have symptoms that persist, you try the dietary modifications, you work with someone like Heather, and you try all the different lifestyle factors, and it's still the person's still remarkably symptomatic. Obviously the doctor would have had to, or whoever they're working with would have had to rule out any other conditions that could be responsible for the symptoms. Obviously hypothyroid symptoms can be very general, like fatigue, which could signal so many other things. But
right.
If it is the thyroid, then it could be reverse T3 can be warranted to see, is there a true conversion issue? And I was actually looking yesterday at what the prevalence of the conversion issue. I mean, it's fairly rare according to the literature that I have. I don't know if you have different.
Yeah. Well, surprisingly, with a lot of the patients that I've worked with, when I request reverse T3 testing, because we've gotten to a place where they've been on medication, they've done everything that they can, we're not seeing the improvements. The doctor is completely frustrated with constantly having to change the medication, change the dosing. And then I will say, okay, enough is enough. We've got to get that reverse T3. And then ultimately that is the culprit, that it's being converted into our reverse T3, which is the inactive form that's just building up in our bloodstream. And so the body is recognizing that as we have enough available. However, it doesn't have the ability to get in the cell and do what it needs to do to produce normal metabolic function.
Yep.
So yeah, so that's kind of the
people who've been through the whole thing, and it's warranted, and that's super interesting. And it is something that also doctors are reluctant to do. I can say at Paloma, we also have some patients that have said, I've tested everything, I need to get this tested, and then our doctors will order it. It's not in our kit, so you can't do it at home just yet.
Okay.
It would require our kit to require more drops of blood. It would require more, obviously it would be more costly, but of course,
right.
People want to pay for it because they want the information. But
right. Well, and unfortunately, I think ultimately that's the big barrier of why it's not a standard component of the testing, because it is more expensive. There isn't enough research around understanding why this is happening, what the solution is to reverse that process. So, but again, I feel very strongly that awareness is the first start. And if we start to make people aware that this could be a potential problem, then there is hope that more funding will go into research to validate the importance of why this measure needs to be included in standardized testing.
Yeah.
So
we should probably partner on some research or some education. It seems like I agree with you, such an important marker that exists where there's kind of a lack of data and education. And I for one, at least with what we're doing with Paloma, we're trying to contribute to deepening the research in the hypothyroid space.
Yeah.
There's so much kind of gray area in some aspects of it.
Right. Absolutely. And, you know, for me, as a practitioner, I'm a firm believer in the root cause of everything starts with stress. And so when we are in that stress state, it's going to, you know, we're basically going into survival mode. Therefore, there's a very specific hormonal pathway that has to occur. And unfortunately, hormone production is not a part of that survival mechanism. So over time, when we're in that state for decades, years, you know, the thyroid is one of the biggest. The adrenals get hit. The adrenals, therefore, then have a major negative impact on the thyroid function. I've seen a lot of women who have transitioned to vegan diets, keto diets, and intermittent fasting. Yeah. These are the three major culprits that I see women intentionally participating in that have a significant long-term impact on thyroid function. It's every time I'm like, okay, when I get the panels back, I'm like, all right, let's talk about what you've been doing, you know, because by the time they get to me, they're so frustrated. They're like, I've done this, I've done that, I've done this, I've tried that, nothing worked. But when I put it all together, it's like, okay, well, your body has been in a significantly stressed state due to all of these extreme tactics that you have tried to lose weight. And now, as a result, it has finally caught up. Your metabolism is no longer functioning as appropriately as it could. And it typically takes anywhere from a year to 3 years to reverse all of that damage. And for women, that's detrimental. They're like, wait a minute, what do you mean it's going to take a year to 3 years to get things back into order? But that's the reality. So setting realistic expectations, I think we need to do more education with all of these fad diets out there to lose weight, because you will get immediate results, but they aren't sustainable. And unfortunately, the long-term impact of those efforts are detrimental.
Yeah. So true. So true. We need to, I mean, everyone's on intermittent fasting or keto or something.
I know. And over the last 5 years, I've just seen literally woman after woman after woman after woman. And then unfortunately, then that usually, by the time it gets to that point, it usually triggers autoimmune disease, Now they start presenting with autoimmune disorders because the body has just been in such a stress state for so long. The immune system has been suppressed, and it's confused. It's just as confused as they are.
Yes, exactly.
So, yeah. So how do you guys determine what doctors you are working with to bring onto your team to evaluate these results? Kind of talk to me about that process. How is it different?
Yeah. So we interview our doctors pretty extensively to make sure that they align with the Paloma philosophy. I'll explain that too. And then we credential them. We go through a pretty rigorous process of credentialing our doctors to it's like a background check, and it's calling their references and checking with their medical school. That's like the standard stuff that a medical practice should be doing. But above and beyond that, we also make sure that we ask them about their philosophy of treating hypothyroid patients. So we've talked to doctors and endocrinologists who believe that, I can just look at the labs and I can prescribe the medication. I don't need to see the patient.
Mm-hmm.
That's not going to be a fit for Paloma. In fact, that's really bad care. Our doctors understand that how patients respond to thyroid hormone can be very individualized.
Mm-hmm.
So they look at the blood work as one aspect of what's going on. They have specific ranges that they keep in mind. It's not just what the lab says, but is the person on thyroid hormone? Is this the first time they're coming with these symptoms? So there's different optimal ranges there. Also understanding that some people are more optimal, that can feel great at 4.5 TSH, mm-hmm. which is not the case for many, many people. So they take the patient's symptoms into account. They do work with folks that have been diagnosed in hypothyroidism in the past. So we do get a number of people that come to us that are looking for the diagnosis. But if we see from labs that it's not likely thyroid, we will refer them out. But once people are diagnosed, we'll work with them to manage their symptoms, to make sure their blood work is right, and to find the right medication. So all our doctors are open to all the various prescription options out there.
Okay, that's great. So
lastly, really importantly, all our doctors do believe in diet and lifestyle changes as an important part of healing your thyroid and thyroid health. So a lot of them will have the conversations around what is the evidence around diet, what's good, what's bad. A lot of them will also admit that they're not the experts. They haven't been trained in diet and lifestyle factors. So they will work with our thyroid-focused nutritionist or refer to our health coach. So we work in tandem with some of the other providers to help kind of give holistic care with medication, lab work, any supplements, and then also diet and lifestyle. That's definitely different than what you can get out there.
So can you describe to the average listener what the process looks like in terms of, okay, we're on the fence. We have fought with our doctors. They won't get me a full thyroid panel. I'm ready to invest out of pocket to get the answers. What does that process look like for them? Where do they start?
Sure. So if you don't have recent blood work, you're welcome to try our at-home test kit that I talked about just earlier with the four markers that will give you a really complete picture of your thyroid. You can order those just on our website. It's palomahealth.com. You get the at-home test kit. It's a finger prick blood test. So you take a couple of droplets of blood from your finger. You put it on a special blood collection card. And I think we have a video of Heather talking about this, right? You have one on your site,
yes.
So you can watch Heather doing it. You take 5 drops of blood on the card, put it in an envelope, send it off to our lab. The label and everything is there for you. And then you get your results by email. Then you can schedule. So, if you already have blood work, from whatever reason, some people do have access to blood work, and that's awesome. You're welcome to upload those results into your Paloma Health portal and schedule your visit with the doctor. So they can look at your results either from Paloma or your results from another lab. And you can have a really comprehensive consultation with the doctor. So it's either they'll look at your blood work, they'll talk about your medical history, they want to know everything. We have a pretty comprehensive intake before you see the doctor, where you fill out medical history, symptoms, medications, supplements that you take, how much you sleep, how well you eat, how not well you eat, all that stuff, smoking,
mm-hmm.
etc. The doctor takes a look at that before they see you, and then they talk to you about your labs, your symptoms, any prescriptions you've taken, any prescriptions that are necessary, and then they can prescribe those to a pharmacy of your choice, and you go ahead and pick it up. I will say that some patients are able to get reimbursement for our blood tests, so we provide all the paperwork.
Nice.
And you can even help submit it to your insurance, so you can get some reimbursement for the blood work. A lot of patients do pay out of pocket, and it's actually either cheaper for them to do it out of pocket than go through insurance for some crazy reason. And then second, also our doctors many times are covered by insurance too. So a lot of times you can use coverage if you have it.
Excellent. And I think that if they go online to paloma.com, they can use my nutrition Vixen code to get a discount. Is that correct?
Right. That's correct. So use Nutrition Vixen for purchasing your test. Absolutely.
Awesome. That's a nice incentive for anyone out there who's on the fence, contemplating whether or not they want to spend the money. So the cost of the test is, to me, the cost of the test is absolutely peanuts. I don't understand why anyone wouldn't do this. It's the cost of like going out to one nice dinner a month.
Right.
It's really, really, really affordable. Prior to discovering you guys, I was using an online service and paying quite a bit of money out of pocket to measure those, just those 5 factors. And then I would tack on a few additional with, the reverse T3 and whatnot. So it always stumps me, people's rationalization around what they're willing to spend money on. And for the listener who has gone to the doctor, they have had the TSH, the free T4, free T3, they still aren't feeling good. I feel that it is just apparent that they have to do the full 5-factor panel to really get the answers that they are needing to evaluate all of the parameters, all of the variables to get to the bottom of things. So
it's interesting, Heather, that I think it's somewhat of a unique United States phenomenon that people don't, it's hard to pay for healthcare. It's hard when you see, you want it to be covered, but it really is an investment. And because of the complexities of all the various stakeholders that we have in our system, there's some perversions, and because there's payers paying for things, they feel like they should decide what they can pay for,
right.
and not. So we're in this situation, and you're right, it is an investment, and it is and it's like a cost of dinner. So our lab tests are $99. You obviously get a discount if you use Nutrition Vixen. But yeah, a lot of times we have patients who don't hesitate, for a nice dinner or whatever it may be, a shirt. But it's really important to get this.
Absolutely. For someone who suffers with hypothyroidism due to my autoimmune kidney disease, I have mine test on every 3 months. It is so important that I evaluate every 3 months. My doctor would recommend that I only do it every 6 months. But for me, I know what can happen over a matter of 90 days, especially when life happens and we're not as on point with our diet. We're not getting as appropriate sleep. Let's say I travel quite a bit for work. And so that will throw things off. And if I'm waiting 6 months, I could have basically taken so many steps backwards with my thyroid function that it's going to take me now at least another 6 months to get back to where I was. So for me, measuring every 3 months is a vital practice to ensure that I am on track, getting the appropriate nutrition, getting the appropriate sleep, focusing on making sure that the medication that I'm using is in the right dosage. For me, myself, Armour is the only one that will work for me. And for the longest time, I was just on a microdose. I argued with my doctor. I said, here are all the symptoms. And I think this is where a lot of patients fail. They don't have the evidence that they need when they go to the doctor to back up their claims around what they're experiencing when they're not in the doctor office. So for me, one of the major symptoms of my thyroid being off is extreme fluid buildup in my lower extremities. And so when I start noticing that I'm having a lot of swelling in my calves and in my ankles and in my feet, I will take pictures. And I will log those pictures into my phone, and they'll go into a nice little file, evidence for doctor. So for instance, about a year and a half ago, I knew I was able to go probably about close to 8 years without needing to be put on any medication. I was able to manage it through diet and lifestyle. And then as my autoimmune kidney disease starts doing things, unfortunately, it creates stress response, inhibiting my body's ability to function as optimally as it should. Therefore, thyroid function is one of those factors that is impacted. And I recognized, okay, things aren't feeling like they should. I was feeling more fatigued. I was having a lot more soreness and, the lower extremity swelling and other stuff. And so I started logging all of that information because I knew that based on my test results, they would say to me, everything's fine, everything looks great. And so I knew that I didn't want to sit there feeling frustrated. So I would come armored with the evidence that I needed to present my case. Yeah. And so ultimately he comes in, he looks at the labs and everything looks great. And I'm like, no. And he's like, no, everything looks fine. And so then I said, okay, well, I need you to take a look at these things. So I pull out my arsenal of pictures documenting all of the things that I was experiencing. And then he was like, oh, let me relook at these labs. And he pulls it up and he starts and he's like, oh, yeah, your thyroid's a little over 2. So yeah, there is indication here that things aren't working as optimally. And so I got him to agree to give me a micro dose of Armor at 0.15 milligrams. That worked really, really well for about a year. And then once again, the swelling started. I started noticing the symptoms and then was able to do the full testing, and my TSH had increased. It had gone up to 2.45 from 1.8. 1.8 is like my optimal range. I like to keep it right in that between 1.5 and 1.8. Yeah. And so ultimately, he didn't argue with me second time around because the evidence was there. We had the history of here's what's happening. Here's the pattern of it increasing. And having that evidence was so vital in ensuring that I was getting what I needed to reverse what was happening. So then 3 months later, after doing the 0.3, I retest. My TSH is back down to the 1.8. So I'm at a 0.3 milligram dosage, and that seems to be working well for me. But again, I will retest in another 3 months because I want to make sure that I'm not decreasing my TSH too much because of the medication. So it's a very fine line. We have to stay, it's kind of like that teeter-totter. You don't want to go up too high, but you also don't want to go down too low.
Absolutely. Yeah. There's dangers in both sides. Yeah,
absolutely.
It's very nuanced, and it's your thyroid's very sensitive to, and it needs very precise care. And if it's out of whack one way or another, you will feel it. Generally, it's not very comfortable. I have actually a quick question for you, Heather.
Yeah.
I'm curious, since you test every 3 months, which a lot of our patients do, and I think it's really important for people who are monitoring their conditions and tracking what's helpful to them in feeling better and feeling certain ways. How do you track those every 3 months labs? Like, would you keep them in a file somewhere?
I do. Yeah. So evidence is really important to me, especially because I have gone so long without health insurance, which my health insurance is kicking in on February 1st. I'm super excited. I've got some things that are going on that I need appropriate healthcare in order to take care of it. But so for me, I try to use the same labs as much as possible.
Yeah.
Yes, because every lab has different diagnostic testing ranges. Their methodology is a little bit different. So if we want to ensure that the variables are reproduced exactly the same to ensure that the results we're getting are, mirrored from the time before, that's extremely important to reuse the same labs as much as possible. So yeah, I print everything out. I keep everything in a nice binder. I go through, I do evaluations to look at all of those different factors to see how things are progressing or regressing. And then from there, I will, do even more work. I kind of like to be a detective. And just make sure that I understand exactly what is going on within the physiology of my body so that I can be in an optimal range. I got diagnosed with a kidney disease when I was 18. And when I got that diagnosis, I got kicked off of my parents' health insurance because I had a pre-existing condition. No one wanted to touch me. So therefore, I ended up, when I got pregnant with my first daughter, I had to go through clinics. I became very, very ill. After her birth, my nephrologist told me I was looking at dialysis or transplant within 5 years. I looked at him and said, without health insurance and having a small child, how is that even an option for me? And so for me, that's where I decided that I had to be proactive. I had to be my own healthcare advocate. And ironically, I graduated high school with a 1.7 GPA. I did not have a lot of confidence in myself in terms of how I was going to figure this all out. I just knew I had to because it was life or death. I wanted to live a quality life. And I feel very fortunate by investing in myself. I've gained 25 quality years on my life, and I am so grateful for that. Every time I see my nephrologist, he's like, you don't age. He's like, you still look exactly like you did when you were 18. He's like, I just don't get it. Yeah. But I owe all of that to really taking control of my own health and advocating for myself and educating and asking the questions and getting the data and collecting the evidence and being able to do that thorough analysis of, what's happening with me. So
super impressive, super inspirational, I'm sure, to many, to myself for sure. I mean, it's hard to, avoid dialysis. It's hard to look at a specialist and say, this is not what is going to happen for me.
Not me.
Right. Gosh, that's so inspirational. Congrats.
Thank you. Well, it's funny, when I decided after the birth of my first daughter, or after my second daughter went to kindergarten, I decided that I was going to pursue a career. I didn't even know at the time there was such thing as a dietitian. I just knew I wanted to do what I had done for myself for other people. And then I find out that it's a pre-med degree. And I reflect back to, oh my gosh, I graduated with a 1.7. I had a chemistry teacher say to me, what the hell are you doing in my class? I'm like, how am I ever going to do this? But I was so passionate and determined to make it work because I know how many people out there are in desperate need of, of my services. And,
Absolutely.
Anyway, where was I going with this? There was a point I was trying to make and now I can't remember.
Well, I was asking you how to track, and so you keep track of everything.
Yeah, so I keep track of everything, and it's become routine. It's just part of what I do now to ensure. So when I go to the doctor, I have all of the information because there's such a limited time that I have with them. I need to make sure that I am presenting all of the evidence, all of the variables to ensure I'm getting the biggest bang for my buck out of that appointment. And I think that's where most people fall short, is that they are in denial that they have to be their own healthcare advocate. We blindly trust our system thinking that it has our best interest at heart. And the reality is that's not the case. It comes down to dollars. And so companies, insurance companies, and I have to defend the doctors because everyone wants to blame them and say, oh, it's the doctor. Well, the reality is that more often than less, it's the insurance companies that are tying the hands of the medical practitioners in terms of what they can and cannot order. And so the doctors don't necessarily want to deny people of access to that. It's just that they don't have the option. And they also are limited on time to really get all of the information to take into consideration. And as you mentioned, we have a shortage with endocrinologists. Therefore, we're leaving it in the hands of people who just don't have the knowledge base that is necessary more often than less for very complicated situations.
Yep.
So
I agree. I think doctors generally will want to help.
Yeah. So I do have to defend all of the fellow medical practitioners out there because I do think that ultimately they're always the ones being badmouthed when people aren't getting the test that they need. And it's not always that they just don't want to, it's that they can't.
Yep, agreed.
So.
And just a quick tip and slight plug for something that Paloma just launched is with everyone that's tracking their levels pretty closely like you are, you're able in your profile, before your lab work was sort of sequential and just you clicked on each one, but right now there's a nice graph that launched.
Oh, fabulous.
Each metric over time, and hopefully you're seeing your TSH just within that normal range, but sometimes, you know, it's
that's a fabulous new factor, because honestly, the company that I had been using previously, that was one of my favorite components of what they offered, was the graphing of the trends. Yep. And so we tend to be visual learners. And so if we have the visual graph, it really puts into perspective what's actually happening versus just seeing numbers go up and down.
Yep.
So I think that that's an awesome addition that you guys have done for the consumer.
Thank you. Yeah, you can look at each metric, TPO, et cetera.
That's awesome.
And then you can tell yourself or work with your nutritionist or whoever you're working with, you know, well, we implemented more sleep habits here, and look at what difference it made, et cetera. So
yeah,
hopefully that'll be nice. And then just to follow up to your point about using the same lab, I think it is very important to get an apples to apples sort of trend.
Absolutely.
And even more important for those that are tracking their autoimmunity. So you actually cannot compare TPO antibodies, which is called an unstandardized lab metric, from lab to lab. So you may have some people come to us, so well, I had 300 TPOs, and with you guys I have 1,100. That's
right.
crazy. The numbers are actually not apples to apples. What should be apples to apples is whether you're have a abnormally high TPO autoantibodies, or if they're in the normal range. But numbers you can only track from lab to lab. So just something that
right. That's a great point. Great point. And I think that ultimately that's one of the confusing factors that leave people very frustrated, because they go to one place and they're like, oh, but it was this, and then now it's this. I don't understand. It doesn't make any sense. Do I actually have Hashimoto's, or do I not have Hashimoto's? So that's a great, thank you for pointing that out.
Sure.
So, well, this has been a lot of fun. Is there anything out there that you would like to tell the listener that maybe we haven't mentioned? I do have one more question for you.
Sure.
So it's kind of personal.
Okay.
So what was the thing that got you to want to go all in on this mission? Yeah.
I grew up in the former Soviet Union. And some of my family is from Ukraine. I grew up in Moscow, but a lot of my family, which we used to go visit every summer, was in Ukraine, which was near Chernobyl. Okay. Because of the nuclear situation, as they grew up, a lot of their thyroids were radiated, and they lived with thyroid symptoms. So it was my aunt, my grandmother, my mother, and I watched them sort of suffer and not be able to get good care for their hypothyroidism. I also mentioned that early on in my career, I worked in the pharmaceutical industry. I think we talked about this, sorry if we didn't, but I was able to work on one of the main drugs used to treat hypothyroidism. So I worked with the doctors and I presented the information for the drugs. So I learned all about the condition from being on the business side of the thyroid condition, and have wanted ever since to sort of, it didn't actually focus on hypothyroidism, to be frank, for many, many years. I just have worked in healthcare system, worked in tech, and I've always wanted to take technology and improve the way care is delivered. And my co-founder, Guillaume, we call him G, had the idea from a friend's experience, who his friend was suffering with hypothyroidism. And my friend was looking to build a business. G was looking to build a business. And he approached me with my healthcare expertise and him with his previous entrepreneurship expertise. He had the idea, and I knew it was something that had to be built. I knew how many patients were suffering. I knew how care was lacking in all these various ways, and that we had to do it. The technology was there that we could build and build awareness for these patients. So it was just more of those, like a couple of tidbits from life, and then just the serendipity of things coming together that made me want to go all in. I quit my sort of very nice job, I would say, and just started from scratch. And it's been about a little over a year, and we launched last July. It's been super gratifying. I mean, we hear women coming to us frequently, and like all the things that we talked about, they have either no insurance or poor insurance, or their doctor hasn't been sort of receptive to their symptoms and all this stuff. And we're able to give that to them. So it's been really, really gratifying. Really grateful to be able to do this.
That's awesome. I absolutely love having an opportunity to work with companies like yourself who are passion, purpose-driven missions. They see a need that, was lacking, and they're offering some relief out there for all of the people who are desperately seeking assistance and the answers. So I strongly believe in what you guys are doing. I appreciate the mission, the efforts. I love the fact that you are being innovative, coming out with new ways to improve the process for the consumer so that they can so that they can have a better experience and a better understanding of what all of this confusing stuff means for you and I, whom have had, 25 plus years of exposure to it. It's easy for us. We get it, but for the average person, they don't. And so trying to break it down, make it as easy as possible for the person. I love the fact that this kit is available, that can be shipped directly to your home. You can do it in the comfort of your home, because the reality is sitting in a lab waiting for your turn is just absolutely horrific. People are coughing. All I can think about is the germs and all of the things. And I'm like, oh, there's so many other things I should be doing right now. This is such a waste of time. And then you get in there and they're trying to find your order, and it's just super frustrating. So I love the fact that you take a lot of those barriers out of being able to get the necessary factors that are needed in order to determine what's really happening here. So I appreciate it. That's awesome.
So much. And thank you for all you do in educating your folks on all the various chronic conditions and the right ways to heal yourself, and the wrong ways too, and all the different repercussions of the various fads out there. So really nice work. It was such a pleasure to chat with you today, Heather.
Well, it's been my pleasure to have you on, and I'm sure that there are a lot of listeners out there who are going to be hopping online today and using the Nutrition Vixen code to get their thyroid test so that they can get to the bottom of their unexplainable symptoms. So I'm excited to have that for them. So thank you.
Here too. Thanks so much. I look forward to talking to you soon, Heather.
Absolutely. Thank you. Thank you so much for spending this time with me on the Think Yourself Healthy podcast. I'm so grateful that you stopped by. If you could just take a minute to share this episode with someone you think who would love it, it would be amazing. Take a screenshot that you've listened to the episode and tag at Think Yourself Healthy and myself at Nutrition Vixen so that I can share it. Leave a review on iTunes to let us know how much you loved being here and what you want to hear next. Until next time, don't forget to think yourself healthy. Thanks again, guys. Bye.